A little disclaimer, please keep in mind that this build is full of experimental and work in progress features and will be constantly changing throughout the testing period. Some features might not even make it into the final release build of version 13. The faction selection screen has had a bit of a refurbishment, and when you hover over them now, there's new images that expand. The map UI tools are now located on a cog wheel in the top right corner instead of being fully displayed vertically across the top of the map. The heads-up display has been changed for a second time, so this is our third HUD design that we've had. I like the changes that they've done with the new ammo count, but I dislike what they've done with the stamina bar. I prefer it being back to the bottom right instead of the lower center of the screen. I like the center of my screen to have as much clear space as possible. I understand why OWI is testing this out, just to make people more aware, I would assume, of their stamina, because it's a bit difficult for some to keep looking to the bottom right of their screen. Movement orders now have a visible line from your character icon to the movement order itself. I'm personally not a fan of it. I prefer limited map clutter. Map drawing has made a return to squad in a limited capacity for squad leaders, where you can place multiple movement lines to create a route. I like this. It means it's a lot easier to plan routes and coordinate with other squads in the planning phases of the match. Another change is the chat box has been updated. I feel it's a little intrusive and it should be a bit closer towards the edge of the screen instead. I do like, however, that the text is a lot easier to read. Anders has been to work and we now have a sharper profile to grenade ignition sounds. These sounds affect Militia, Insurgent and Russian grenades. Rally points now have a radio audio cue. From my testing, it's audible up to about 25 meters, but you can hear it faintly. Vehicle repair stations now have an audio cue as well as a visual update. From my testing, you can hear it up to about 40 meters. As you've just heard, Anders has updated the M4 sound and it's pretty sick. I would prefer if it had a bit of a sharper pop to it, but it's a good change overall. This is a cool and nice little change. I think it's one of my favorite sound changes in the game. You can now hear the ringtone of the cell phone on the IED when you trigger, and if you look closely on the cell phone, every time you use it there's a different dev name on it itself. Bruno has been to work as well, and we've had quite a few visual effects upgrades. As you can see, when deployables explode, they now have a lot more smoke, particles and debris. There's a lot more detail on weapon muzzle flash. We also have the added effect of illumination onto surfaces. More detail has been added to destroying tyres on vehicles compared to the last test that we had with V13. Blood effects have been updated. There's now a lot more visible red mist as well as detail on the blood itself. The animators have been to work and we now have digging down animations. It's a welcome change, so now new guys can actually tell if they're either digging up or down. This is one of my favourite changes. You no longer have to reload every time you put your GL away and pull it back out. The game now remembers every time you load a GL and put it away. So when you pull it out, you can just fire it away straight away. When talking in VOIP, there's now visible mouth moving animations.
I bet you're recording the whole song.
That immersion. A new animation caught my eye, and that is your character inspecting his weapon. It appears to be a random trigger whether your weapon is ready or in a lowered state. I would prefer if it happened if you were idle for a short period of time instead of just randomly occurring. Lots and lots of optics. This is what we've got with V13. Timestamps in the description below for the factions that you want to view. We now have a V3 layer of Chora. It's essentially V2 except we have the British instead of the Americans. Tallil has an experimental map layer, where the Russians and US both have 12 tanks and 3 lodges. We get our hands on the Destruction game mode, which is kind of like Invasion and Insurgency had a baby. It's pretty straightforward in its design. There will be 6 caches total, and only 2 will be active at one time. When you destroy the first 2, the next 2 will be unlocked. The catches, each location of a cache will have multiple areas the enemy will have to search and try and locate. When they do locate it, they have to destroy it with a C4 or explosive. The attacking team obviously wins by destroying all caches, and the defending team simply wins by holding out long enough until the timer runs out. Defenders have the advantage at the beginning of multiple forward spawns, but they still have to transport lodges from main. The issue I came across is the attacking team gains the advantage after the first 2 caches are destroyed. They can easily make it to the following cache locations before the enemy can set up a defense. But this is what testing is for, so we can test things in their infancy and find out what the issues are so they can be ironed out before they're fully released into a stable branch. Overall, I think the game mode's fun and it has its place in squad, but it just needs a few tweaks here and there just to balance it out a little. RAAS now has Fog of War, where you will not see the following caps until you've captured that neutral or attack point. The start of a game can be a bit chaotic as people want to rush around and try find the enemy caps before they're available, which can cause assets to be scattered around the map trying to search for the next cap point. You know, just the typical puppy stuff. Fog of War does add a bit more of a linear flavour to RAAS, but it also centralises the combat to 2 points at one time. Personally, I'm not too fussed about the game mode. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. Granular Rearming has had an update compared to the last build. We now have a lot more control over how many items we want to replenish. We can now swap kits from vehicles. Certain vehicles will only allow you to choose a crewman kit, while other vehicles will allow all kits. On screen there will be information on what vehicles provide what. In this test build, BTRs have received a much needed buff, because they've been constantly getting shit on in V12, so this is much needed. The too long don't read version is both vehicles received an armoured plate protecting the engine, and the 30 mil received a 20% increase on its damage. So basically they have a fighting chance now. The rocket techie is not as useless anymore. It now has a camera attached to the rocket pod for the gunner, as well as a ranging tool to help be a bit more accurate across distances. Another thing I noticed is you can aim a bit further to the left and right and up and down. Rockets also arm a bit closer than they used to as well. On top of all of this, I believe a lot of HE weapons have received a buff to their damage radius. No longer will people complain about vehicle wrecks blocking roads or bridges. We can now place C4 on wrecks and destroy them. There's been a noticeable improvement with vehicle driving and physics. I have not once hit a rock and flown into orbit, and I have not once hit a log and flipped up on my roof. In saying this, turning corners or just turning in general seems a bit tight and stiff, but it seems overall that fishtailing and slip and sliding has been reduced a lot too. Traversing terrain is a lot easier as well, but you still go pretty slow up steep hills. An experimental change has been added where you will no longer instantly die after being killed within 60 seconds of being revived. I really dislike this, and I believe people should be punished if they're killed after being revived from being careless. They should not be able to be repeatedly revived to correct their mistakes. Vertical recoil adjustments have happened to weapons. I want to put more time into V13 before making my mind up, but I'm not minding the changes so far. Ticket bleed has been reintroduced in this test, and it is a much needed change. Due to many changes in V12, it really put defenders in a good spot and attackers in a bad spot. If you were attacking, you really had diminishing returns. There was no real incentive to attack, and you're far better off trying to defend your defense point. This created prolonged and drawn out matches where people played Mexican standoff and weren't being proactive. There's some differences with the ticket bleed now, and it's not as aggressive as it used to be, and I think it's going to be a welcome change for many. Experimental changes have been made with movement, speed and stamina. While I do enjoy the change, I can agree that it's a bit too fast for what squad is. The issue I've noticed is not only do we have a faster sprint speed, we have a faster jog speed and a faster stam regen. I wouldn't mind a 5% speed increase over the 10% speed increase. I also wouldn't mind a slightly slower stam regen, as it takes 10 seconds to fully stam up from 0 to full while standing. The solution is to meet in between V12 and what we have now. I know it's an early build, but animations and the sounds of running need to be tweaked. With these two combined together currently, it makes you seem like you're running faster than you are. Even though we are running quite fast, it just gives off that you're running at light speed. The buddy rally system, alrighty. So if you look on screen right now, you can see I can spawn on another squad's rally. So essentially, if your squad loses its rally and your squad leader's dead, he can spawn a rally on top of another friendly squad's rally point. I really dislike this. I believe if your rally gets wiped or you put a rally in a stupid spot, you don't get a second chance. You should be punished by losing your rally point. It also takes away the usefulness from a fob and what a fob is. The fob should be the main spawn point, the main important one, and the buddy rally system just takes a piece of that pie away. But I'm glad OWI threw it in this test, just so we could test different things out to see what works and what doesn't. The Insurgents are being buffed and can place 2 HABs per fob now. In this test build, the Militia can also place 2 HABs per fob, but that's a bug and unintended. I do like this little buff. I think it's going to help out that the Insurgents can swarm an area like cockroaches, even though it's going to increase the footprint of their fob overall. This is pretty much it for this video. This is basically all the information I've come across and found out. Hopefully you guys found it useful, and until the next video, I'll catch you guys later. Push over, boys.